On today's podcast,
it is beautiful, but you can't force somebody to slow down. You really can't, because you also have the neurological component of them possibly being addicted to their stress hormones until they see
great
that,
point.
until they start doing the nervous system work, and
Yeah.
that's usually like if we come to an agreement of like, hey, I need you to run through the Gupta program, or I need you to do some kind of nervous system retraining before we can move forward. Sometimes it does look like that.
If you're a healthcare provider tired of just treating symptoms and ready to dig deeper into the root causes of health issues, the Vibrant Wellness Podcast is for you. With insider tips, expert interviews, and the latest in biotech research, this podcast will take your patient care to the next level. Hello, everyone. My name is Jen Rivas, one of the co-hosts with the Vibrant Wellness Podcast, and I am thrilled to introduce my other co-host, Dr. Emmy Brown. Good morning, Dr. Emmy.
Good morning, Jen.
How are you doing today?
I'm feeling good. It's Friday.
It is Friday.
Friday.
Friday. And we could not be more excited. We've got a great episode to look forward to today. We have with us Stacy Baker, a traditional naturopath whose journey is a testament to the power of perseverance and the potential for transformation. For years, she battled one chronic condition after another, coming oh so close to being labeled as bedridden despite having quote unquote normal blood work. I'm sure we have some listeners who can relate to that. Then enter in functional medicine. Once Stacy began to see the opportunities and potential for healing by looking at her body as a whole, she proceeded to one by one conquer her symptoms. She honed her ability to listen to her body, and now she's on a mission to establish that roadmap for healing others. So get ready to be inspired, educated, and maybe even walk away with a few aha moments along the way. I'm super pumped to welcome Stacy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. What a great intro. I appreciate that so much.
Of course.
There's so much we can unpack, and I know you're willing to talk about your own personal journey, which we really appreciate, and I think our listeners do too. So before we dig in there, I'm really interested in how did you become interested in environmental medicine in terms of everything we come in contact with so many toxins and really just supporting detox overall.
Yeah, so definitely my journey definitely was a huge part of that. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But what I found was with my own patients, you could be doing a protocol, that is created through functional medicine. And if you're not really getting to the root of these chronic conditions and chronic infections or that immune system imbalance, you could be on this protocol forever. So it really is important to look and address your foundation and making sure that you're actually looking at the toxins that your body's holding on to and stopping those exposures and making sure you're helping your body clear them. So it's been a lifelong lesson that I've been dealing with. And then, and then even more in deeper experiences, what my clients really just, what are they unable to move out? And that really is what sets the stage for chronic conditions.
Awesome. And I do want to dive into your story because it's fascinating. And so share a bit about your upbringing. I've heard you talk about this on other podcasts and how sort of that really led the building blocks to sort of your passion and path for solving this puzzle we call optimal health.
Yeah, definitely. So like I'm sure you're referring, I was raised in a family of doctors. Both my parents and my brother's a doctor, an MD. So I've been raised around conventional medicine my whole life, which honestly led me to a state of like health anxiety because I knew, what the worst case so many things could be. And so for me, I would say the sickest in my family of 8. And it all goes all the way from oral health, which I'm sure you guys are, I know you just had an episode about that. So oral health to antibiotic use, all due to ear infections because of dairy sensitivities, so it just was a snowball effect. And so I really got hit the hardest out of my whole family. And so it was interesting to me that, I was going through the conventional route, running these labs. My blood work was looking fine. And yet I still felt like I was 80 years old when I was 20. And then dealing with things like really debilitating agoraphobia, anxiety, couldn't do normal day-to-day things, and then debilitating brain fog and fatigue. And this was when we're supposed to be in our prime, right? And then throw breast implant illness on top of it. And so it was just, it set the scene for just disastrous health. And so for me, I knew there had to be a better way. So I committed to learning, and, I discovered functional medicine around the time of my breast implant illness. Of course, that was self-diagnosed because it's still not a diagnosable thing, but we all know it's there. And worked with a practitioner myself. And in the middle of that, I had already had my master's in nutrition. And I knew that wasn't enough too, because we live in such a toxic world. There's still more to the story. It's more than just diet. It's more than just taking these protocols. So, and it really got into assessing my lifestyle, my environment, my products, looking at my toxin load to really get me to that place, right? And that's, so many people are kind of missing that mark, and they're treating the bug and they're treating the pathogen or whatever it may be, and they're not looking at the what is the environment in which they can persist in the body. And usually it does refer to the toxin load and what it's doing to us systemically.
Yeah. Just real quick, I'm curious. You said family of 8. Where do you fall in that group?
I'm in the middle. I'm one of 2 middles. Yeah.
Okay, so, and you mentioned, Stacy, breast implant illness, which is becoming a little bit more well known, but I still think we don't hear enough about it. So when did you start to suspect that was an issue? And I'm wondering, how does it typically present? And how long after getting breast implants do people tend to notice these symptoms?
Well, what I'm noticing is that it's even, so the women that I'm treating for breast implant illness are not the old school, like I got these 40 years ago women, right?
Mm.
It's the younger women, because for one, they're more toxic now. And that's kind of my theory, that the implant itself is more toxic, but also our toxin load is so much higher at such a younger age now. So, I mean, I've
Right.
come across women who have had symptoms immediately, like a month following. And that can
Mm.
look anywhere from the brain fog, the chronic fatigue, sometimes skin issues. Sometimes the body actually rejects the implant itself and won't heal. It's really just a lot of autoimmune-esque symptoms that are popping up. And to me, if it weren't for the breast implant, would it be something else that would set these women into this cascade of symptoms? And I really do think yes. I do. So I can't say that was the root of all of my symptoms, because it was just my toxicity across the board, and the breast implants were what really just pushed you over the edge. And that's what's happening with so many women. So it's important to make sure that, because so many women have so much work to do after they get them removed. And that was my case. I was hoping I'd be one of those women that woke up after surgery and it's just like, oh, everything's perfect now. And sometimes that happens. But for me, it was years of, like I said, antibiotic use. I grew up on a farm that was sprayed heavily with glyphosate. So that was another layer. So just layer after layer, oral health, all of those things, those were all things I had to address to get to that, better place. So it's important to know it's okay if you don't feel 100% after that explant, because there's still a lot of layers.
Yeah. And such a great point in terms of timing. It can vary because people are already carrying around so much toxic load to begin with. So
Yeah.
maybe those implants were a tipping point. Maybe something else could have been a tipping point. So, and I think that's so important, as it's so many things in our environment, unfortunately, now. And so what about, of course, we can test for all sorts of toxins. Are there any particular features on lab tests rather, that you look for in terms of breast implant illness, or any features that pop out to you on laboratory work?
I usually see a correlation with some sort of gut imbalance. So yeast fungal is usually there. Sometimes bacterial. Because obviously you've been on antibiotics for the surgery and things like that too. So there's usually some kind of gut imbalance to follow. And then I always see an underlying heavy metal toxicity. So they're there. Uh, it's hard because the phthalates and the parabens and things like that, they do show up, but are they from the implant themselves? It's hard to say because that's one of those, the body will hold on to them, right? They're forever chemicals.
Right.
And so I would say most often you're going to see yeast fungal, and then you're going to see the heavy metal toxicity.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned, that some of the clients that you're working with are younger, and it is because of this toxic load that we're being exposed to at a younger age. Let's maybe just talk about what are we being inundated with, as far as toxins, and what impact are you seeing as a provider on the human body with the patients that you're working with?
Yeah, definitely. So it's interesting. I have yet to test someone that doesn't have heavy metals in their system. So I have this theory that heavy metals are like the underlying like layer for literally everyone anymore, and it's because it's in our air, it's in our water, it's literally everywhere. So heavy metals are definitely, so I guess we can go backwards. If you think about toxin loads, so you're thinking about chemical toxins, but there's also biotoxins. So toxins from stealth pathogens, parasites, viruses, other things going on. Endotoxins, so what they're releasing into the bodies, and then you have things like environmental, like mycotoxins. So many things are just kind of layering on and affecting people, and then thinking about the toxicity of even our thoughts, right? I mean, that can send a cascade of neuropeptides that's going to also alter our DNA replication. So there's so many toxins, and even our environment. If we live in a really cluttered or very toxic or negative environment, that can certainly affect our healing process too. So it's important. You can't really test for that, right? But it's important to make sure you're assessing and kind of creating some of those things. But toxin load in general looks a little bit differently for everybody, and it's going to show up and manifest in different symptoms for people. So sometimes if it's more of that biotoxin load, you're going to have gut imbalances, you're going to have brain fog, you're going to have digestive issues, things like that. If you are more towards the endocrine disruptive, it can be anything that the HPA axis or the HPT axis, or anything that is affected by brain signaling. So hormone issues, adrenal issues, thyroid issues, all of these things are so heavily affected. So really any sort of alteration in the immune system is going to set, kind of pave the way for that chronic, people are chasing that one bug or that one virus or whatever it may be, but it's important to look at, why is it there? What's allowing it to be there? What's throwing the immune system? And then, of course, thinking about liver burden. We have this epidemic of blood sugar issues, hormone issues. Women are getting into perimenopause way younger than they ever did. Girls are getting into puberty even younger because of all these, estrogen and endocrine disruptors. And so it looks a little bit differently for everybody, but it is, it really is when that toxin load gets full, that's when you start to see those kind of warning lights go off. And if you continue to, ignore them or band-aid them, they're going to scream a little bit louder in some other way.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I was going to ask Stacy, what toxins do you see show up most commonly? But you mentioned heavy metals, and I can speak to that too. We look at so many of these total tox burden tests that we run here. And at baseline in the adult reports, you're going to see a little bit of everything: environmental toxins, mycotoxins, heavy metals. So I'm wondering, do you do anything to provoke certain patients? And then at that point, which ones are coming out more? And just kind of in terms of your patient population, because I think, you talk about phthalates and plastics and BPA and, in terms of like a lot of body products that people are applying, what comes out more if and when you provoke?
I typically do not provoke because I have so many people who are coming to me that like are sensitive to NAC or any sort of liver support. So and sometimes I usually run people through testing before I meet with them. So just on a preventative note, I find that I don't even need to because there's so much that's coming out anyway. And then I also look at hair tests, for metals to see it like, okay, what's a chronic exposure, what's an acute exposure, and then we kind of put those two together. I will say on top of heavy metals, another one that shows up in literally almost everyone is glyphosate. And so we know that even if you're eating as organic as you possibly can, there is still some runover. Or if you have a meal out with your family at a restaurant, you're going to have some exposure. So yeah, it is important. But no, I don't provoke just because I don't want to push detox too much on a really sensitive system. I can't imagine what would show up if we did, because I already have enough from what we see, right? And I think it might actually be a little overwhelming, because I think sometimes people walk away from their interpretation like, oh my gosh, like I need to go buy a bubble, and that's not the case either, right? We're all exposed to these things. It's just how well can our system move them out.
Right. Really
Yeah.
the terrain, which is what we're always coming back to here. The
Yes.
environment, what's the body set up to do and not, really looking at that up front. Yeah.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about this sort of hustle culture that we find ourselves in, right? And
Yeah.
like, how do you feel like that is contributing to the rising state of dis-ease that we're seeing in Western society? You know, apart from the things that we're aware of, I feel like that sort of stuff, we're not always conscientious about how it's affecting us.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And this was such, of course, I had to learn the hard way for everybody. So I paved the way, for for everybody I work with. But it truly is this hustle culture, this inability to shut off. It's so interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and we were talking about, I'm not that old, right? But I remember when TV programming would actually turn off at night. Like it would actually turn off. And now everything is available 24/7. And what is that doing to our nervous system? What is that doing to all of our signaling, right? Because all the signaling starts in the brain. And so when you think about the adrenals, you have to think about the nervous system component of it. And we live in just a very, we're pushing burnout 24/7 with what we're trying to achieve. And so, and it's interesting because people are like, okay, well, what do I take for burnout? And it's like, well, you take rest. You have to rest. You have to slow down.
You
We
stop
could crank you
hustling.
through.
That's what you do.
Yes,
know
you
what else
have
they
to
can do.
stop. Yes, but that's the thing. That's just how disconnected we are. We're like, okay, well, can we just like push through with some adrenal cortex or
Yeah.
whatever it may be? And it's like, no, you have to change your lifestyle. So it's really important to make sure that that is part of your treatment plan, because it's just, you have to, when you look at things as an energetic balance, we have things that are draining our energy, like toxin load, pathogens, all of these things, EMFs, all of these. And we have to make sure that we are not draining that energy load even more, because we need to conserve energy for the body to heal. So that's how you have to look at things. What can you check off your list? What can you say no to? What can you set boundaries on so that you can conserve that energy to heal? And that's kind of how I explain things to clients, because it is unsustainable. And we're finding that, right? Burnout's happening younger and younger.
Yeah. Right. And you said it. People are looking for a Band-Aid to the hustle culture. And it's like, no, there is no Band-Aid. It's just like, what you're doing in your practice, you got to get back to the root cause. And it is the actual hustle that's causing that stress and everything else.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, Stacy, how do you get someone who's so used to go, 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 go? They want to take a pill. They want that magic bullet. If they're not compliant in terms of slowing down, what motivates them? I mean, I'm sure it's different for everybody. Breath work, body work, grounding. How do you get those people? I mean, and even doing those things, they want checklists, right?
Yes.
It's that type of person in the hustle culture.
It is really hard. And honestly, there are some people who it's too much of a change for at first. I've had people who are just so, because I think people think, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to run these labs and I'm just going to take supplements and continue on this lifestyle and everything's going to be cool. And I think when some people realize like, oh, I actually have to make a lot of changes and shifts, sometimes it can be overwhelming. And I have had people take a break for a few months and kind of recollect, but come back and be like, hey, we shifted jobs. We quit this high stress job. We've come back. We've done this. So, I mean, it is beautiful, but you can't force somebody to slow down. You really can't, because you also have the neurological component of them possibly being addicted to their stress hormones until they see that, until they start doing the nervous system work, and that's usually like, if we come to an agreement of like, hey, I need you to run through the Gupta program, or I need you to do some kind of nervous system retraining before we can move forward. Sometimes it does look like that. And they really have to see the importance of that slowing down their mind, slowing down their thoughts, and possible that dopamine addiction, which we are just flooded with right now.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yes. And I just imagine planting that seed. And
You
sometimes if
have
they're
to.
not ready to hear that, you let them go on their way, let it marinate. And when they're ready,
Yeah.
they come to you. And that's just a good reminder for all listeners. You have to meet your patient where they are. And oftentimes it can be really a struggle in functional medicine because there are so many steps and it takes a lot of patience and it's such a process. So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that to light.
Yeah.
Give them the information. Sometimes they just need to leave and then come back when they're ready.
Right.
Hopefully I'm sure that, a lot of them do come back because something sinks in because they realize what they're doing is not working.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes people even have gone and tried other things first and then been like, oh yeah, you were right. You were right or whatever it is. And like you said, you could watch the same program. You could listen to the same lecture. You could read the same book over and over and over again, but only what you're ready to hear or see is what's going to resonate with you. So you have to be in that receptive mindset. And I totally get that. And it's part of healing, and if your body's stuck in survival, the idea of changing things so dramatically it's a threat. You're going to tag that as a threat, And so it's really hard, but it's important to be empathetic to someone because a lot of times there's such a disconnect from their mind and their body when they're that sick, and they do have to learn things in their own time, so it's part of the process.
I just want to pull on that thread a little bit more because I'm thinking providers that are listening, they're struggling with that too, right? It's that patient compliance. And I'm curious, do you do any sort of vetting process beforehand, any sort of application or questionnaire that will let you know, okay, this is a good patient. They are ready. They are at that place. Or do you just sort of let them find that journey on their own?
I do have an initial questionnaire that I have them, fill out. And actually, like one of those questions is do you believe you can get better? I mean, it is important to kind of, if the belief is not there, then the mind body are never going to connect and heal.
Good question.
And so I do kind of do that. I have a hard time saying no to people who really want to try, they want to try to get better. And even if the disconnect's there, at least I'm hoping I can inspire or at least plant a seed to get them started on their journey. And so it is hard, but I would say I've been so blessed. There hasn't really been anybody who's come to me where I'm like, oh, this will never work. This is not a good fit. And I don't know if I don't know. I think with having such a presence on Instagram, people are coming to me more for my specific personality. And I think if they already kind of know how I'm going to be. And so that kind of helps too, right? So it is this false sense of I already know the person before I start working with them.
Yeah, that's true. And I do think being on social, you attract a certain type of client because they're resonating with you and your story and can see themselves in your journey. So that's a good point.
Yeah.
And I do know that you work with sort of a plethora of patients, it sounds like. I'm curious, what specific chronic conditions do some of your patients share, or what type of patient do you typically work with, especially as it applies to like toxic exposures?
Yeah, so I do work with such a variety. And that was one thing I kind of started out saying, like, I don't want to just do hormones. I don't want to just do, gut. I kind of want to just be open to whatever. So I have everywhere from men exposures in the military to children, with autism spectrum children to I say my biggest market, and I'm sure you all know this, is my women from probably 30 to 50. That's when we kind of all noticed that something's off. The conventional labs aren't really resonating with how we're feeling. We've had maybe pregnancies or hormone shifts or anything like that. And women we're more intuitive with our bodies. It's going to be way easier for, a woman to, guys are great. They do the work, but I don't have as many male clients because life has to hit them pretty hard before they make some big changes. But I do have some that are like, they're biohackers and they want to do more, and they're like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And but women do notice these warning lights go off before. So yeah, I would say mostly women between 30s and 50s. And most of the time it looks like anxiety is a huge one. So anxiety or depression, coming to me with that, with just chronic, they've done everything. They've tried medications. hormone imbalances, which are usually due to being on birth control for 10 to 15 years and never being taught to support, the nutrients, and or having pregnancies and then just being more depleted afterwards. Infertility is another big one I'm seeing, and that really does align with those endocrine disruptors that you're talking about, and that even the glyphosate is a huge trigger for infertility. So yeah, just kind of chronic conditions, but it kind of starts, I like when people catch it when it's just like a little, like, beep, something's off, before it goes full blown, but I like those. But whether it's just like, oh, I'm having brain fog or some digestive issues, those are the easy ones, right? Because they caught that first symptom being off. But yeah, but it all does boil down to even the hormones and things like that. What is burdening the liver? What's making your bile stagnant, and not able to flow and things like that. So it all points back to that toxicity, no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. And even going back before we consider the toxic load, I imagine, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, is gut health. Because if we're not moving these things through, we don't have proper bile flow, if we're not eating enough fiber, if we have improper digestion, all of that's going to make it really hard to detox appropriately and optimally. So I
Absolutely.
imagine, is that generally where you start? And I'm saying general, that's kind of the nature of the podcast, right? We have to individualize plans. But I'm curious because I get that question all the time from providers. Where do I start? We're looking at so many different parameters.
Yes.
So how do you tackle these cases?
Yeah. So as far as toxins go, definitely always start with the gut. Because the thing is, the gut houses our immune system, our neurotransmitters, so if you can calm that immune system coming, that inflammation coming from the gut, then you can pretty much shut off a lot of systemic inflammation. So I always start with the gut, but I will say before that, sometimes you have to assess the foundation, right? You have to make sure water supply is up. They're getting plenty of minerals in their day-to-day water that a lot of people are under eating. So balancing blood sugar has to be foundational. Assessing the environment, like I said, not just clutter, but toxins, making sure that you're stopping the exposure. Otherwise, you really can't move forward. So really assessing and doing a very thorough intake of, like, where is their foundation right now? Because if you don't build that and you go straight for toxins, even if it's gut infections or whatever it may be, it's going to be kind of shaky ground that you're building on, and you're going to have to come back to it. So you might as well just build it up from the get-go, meet them where they're at, get their stomach acid up, work on those things, even though it doesn't seem like a lot. Sometimes getting them enough minerals in their water and getting the toxic water out of the home can do so much. Water is movement. And so we're so focused on supplements and binders and things like that, but it's really important to make sure that we're looking at what are we mostly composed of and working with that, making sure we have clean source of that. So it can look a little simple in the beginning, but all of those are supporting detoxification. Getting enough fiber is supporting detoxification. So all of those things do play a role. But it does, you're right. People see labs and they get freaked out and they're like, how do I get this out of me? So you have to kind of like, look, we're addressing this, this is how we're addressing it. We're making sure you get plenty of water, fiber, doing all these things. And then we'll get there. Don't worry. We'll incorporate in a lifestyle. We'll get there, so it's a lot of foundational work too.
Yeah. We can't underestimate those fundamentals. And because a lot of people they don't know about filtering their water. They don't know about, and you said under eating.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother topic. That's really fascinating. I imagine you see that a lot with female patients.
Yes, right? Yes. Because we're all coming off the cusp of that dieting culture, that calories in, calories out mentality and things like that. And especially when women's hormones start to shift immediately, they think, oh, I got to cut all my carbohydrates or whatever it is. And you're like, oh, like they're chronic fatigue, but they're cutting all their carbohydrates and you're like, oh no. And their sleep is terrible. So sometimes you have to address those things, or like just working with your circadian rhythm, making sure that most people, eat their biggest meal of the day at dinner. And of course their sleep's going to be affected. And of course they're going to have blood sugar dips, from carrying on to the next day. So working with the body's circadian rhythm, eating as the sun's up, not skipping breakfast. Sometimes you have to make sure those are happening before you do any sort of hormonal support, because the more you can connect with your body's natural rhythm, all of those things will eventually correct too. So it's really, a lot of people think like, oh, it's just, why do I need to get sun every day, and, whatever it may be. But being able to explain to them why and how that's going to help your serotonin and your melatonin and all of these things. It's amazing that we need to know why nature is going to be good for us, but it's so important to make sure we're incorporating that every day.
You took the words out of my mouth, Stacy. I was thinking it's so crazy how far away we've gotten from these very natural rhythms, and we do have to explain the why, because we are so glued to our screens inside in our dark little caves, and
Yeah,
it's wild. But yeah, let's get back to nature. I'm on board with that.
It's a wild time, but it's also this beginning of an awakening, which is so beautiful to be a part of. And I'm like, we are returning to nature, and like, yay, I can help teach you that. It is wild how far, where I have to prescribe sunshine to people. It's a pretty wild time.
Yes, there's a program, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but you can order prescription pads for writing out time in nature.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
And there's even a tool linked to this service where you can look up the closest park or
nice
nature preserve, and they will send you prescription pads for this.
Oh, I love it. It's happening.
Well, I want you to take us to Stacy School, because I feel like, as someone who's lived the walk and have healed yourself, and I know you just touched on a few, but give us your own personal day-to-day tips on minimizing your toxic burden. Like, what can we do to sort of lessen those negative effects? I know we can't eliminate it. It's just part of our culture, our everyday lives, but what do you do to help minimize that?
Yeah, definitely. And it is important to note that, like, these have been shifts I've been making over a long period of time. It wasn't something that shifted overnight. So whether you're just trading out your plastic, foodware for glassware as you replace those, or whatever it may be, all of those little changes will make such a difference. But for me, I wake with the sun as often as I can. I try to not have to get up way before the sun comes up. Sometimes I have to. I try to wake with the sun. I have to do a lot of nervous system work, because for me that was a big part of my my story, was just having this chronic activation, this fight or flight anxiety situation. So for me, I have to make sure that I am always taking care of that part of me. There's some post generational trauma that I have too, with my grandparents being in World War II. So it's there. It's a part of me. So making sure that I am exposing my eyes to sun to help with that. Like I said, the serotonin, the melatonin, it's going to improve your sleep that night. I practice gratitude in the morning. I move my lymph in some way, whether I use a vibration plate or I'm dry brushing. And I try to move my body, whether I go on a walk or I'm weight training that day. I try to get things moving. That's going to help with circulation. I'm always drinking structured water. I start my day off with that before I eat anything. So drinking a decent amount of structured water to help your body flush everything it's been trying to detox overnight. And then, of course, I always eat before I weight train or anything like that. So I never skip breakfast anymore. I was one of those people like, oh, it's fine. I'll just wait till lunch. I'm not even hungry. And we all know that that's not a good sign, right? That's not a good sign. So even though it might feel right, don't do it, especially if you're trying to balance your hormones. So I try to have most of my food eaten by lunchtime, for the day, which sounds so crazy, but actually it's when your digestion's a lot stronger. You're really going to utilize that energy throughout the day. It's going to help with cortisol levels and things like that. So making sure that, you have plenty of protein throughout the day. That's a huge thing for me, is hitting my protein goal. Making sure I'm drinking plenty of water throughout the day. Just thinking about different ways to support movement and drainage is, always on the back of my mind. So like I said, that can be anything from just drinking plenty of structured water and walking. Of course, minimizing your exposure through, all of my home and beauty products are clean now. They weren't always, but they are now. My cookware, my food storage ware, all of that stuff is clean. I have air purifiers as well as plants, which can be amazing air purifiers. So you don't always have to have these, ridiculously expensive tools, plants, and leaving the windows open as much as you can. I'm in Florida, and throughout our winter, I had my windows open for like 4 or 5 months, and it was amazing. And that will never replace, the air filters will never replace what just movement of air in your home is. So plants, light exposure, I make sure I have, get at least an hour of sunlight a day. It's, obviously that's a lot, but not everybody can handle an hour, but at least 10 to 15 minutes to get your vitamin D levels up. And then, my lightest meal is dinner. So that my digestion can have a break. I always go on a walk in the evening after dinner to help with blood sugar stability. Once again, just moving lymph, helping with circulation, all of those things. And then just really like decompressing after, really not really having blue light on after the sun sets. Of course, I have blue light filters on all of my devices throughout the day. All of those things can be really active for the nervous system, and so just watching all those things that can kind of keep you in that fight or flight. And then, of course, I turn off my Wi-Fi. So no Wi-Fi, no EMF going through my home at night. I turn it off at night. I have a timer. There's no reason to have, now that we're like bound to these smart home things, some people, they have to keep it on. I don't know. I don't feel good about that. I'm a little bit analog in that regard. I'd rather just have my Wi-Fi off and not going through my home and my kids' bedrooms at night. So that's like a typical day. And it seems it's all just like little things I've incorporated over time. And sometimes I do more, right? Like sometimes I'll do castor oil pack or a PEMF mat or a coffee enema on a Sunday if I have time, whatever it may be. Just digging a little deeper, or liver flush if I'm feeling crazy. Those are a little advanced. That's just another fun Sunday for me.
What about
you're having your coffee a different way?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you tell us what is structured water? I may
was gonna ask
really
the same-
behind, but I've only heard that
okay.
term maybe twice. Definitely just once before.
So think about water in its most natural state. And so many people are chugging water and they're dehydrated on a cellular level. So the best resource to think about structured water is Gerald Pollack wrote The Fourth Phase of Water. But it's essentially, if you think about water in our pipes and in our industrial system, everything is flat, right? And think about water naturally. It's going through waterfalls, it's moving, it's got air in it. It's structured differently. If you look under a microscope, you see that the structure of it is actually like beautiful, and it is going to hydrate our cells. And so if you're just drinking just straight distilled water or reverse osmosis water or, anything, even just filtered from the tap, the water loses that structure. It's not able to get into our cells properly and really hydrate us on that cellular level and move through our body's tissues like it should. And so structuring, so making sure, and it looks different for everybody. Some people structure it just in the sunlight. Some people use a vortexer. That's what I do. I put in a vortexer to structure it, and then mineralizing it. Otherwise, you're just flushing the water through your system. So filtering, structuring, and mineralizing your water is super important to make sure that you're really getting the most out of it and actually hydrating your cells and not just flushing more minerals out.
Interesting. I was going to ask the same question, Emmy. I had never heard that term before. So is it, I don't know if I'm fully understanding, is it something you can buy? Is it something you have to run your water through? What is it specifically you do?
So the vortexer I use is actually like a swirler. So it's like, it makes like a vortex in it. So it actually aerates the air. So that's one way you can do it. You could set it in the sun and it would structure on its own. Some people structure with some stones in their water. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that as much, but for me, I like to see it visually, so if I see it moving visually, I'm like, and it does feel different. It's so weird. The water, my kids call it fluffy water because it just feels like lighter and airier. It's really interesting.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's really kind of cool. Yeah. And it's, you know how when you like drink water and it just kind of sits there and you feel like it's not going anywhere, it's just like sloshing around in your belly. Like a lot of times it's just because your water's flat, like it's not structured.
It's not
So it's
fluffy.
either doing that.
Not
Yeah, it's not fluffy.
fluffy.
So between that and adding minerals, because so many people are already so mineral deficient, making sure we're not flushing those, that reserve even more by adding the minerals to your water.
Learn something new every day. Thank you. Well, let's switch gears into tools and techniques. And I know we have touched on the testing. Do you have any go-to tester methodologies with some of the patients that you just talked about? And, what I know you mentioned too, which I'm kind of interested in, you test your patients before you actually do a consult. Is that right? So walk us through kind of what that process looks like.
Yeah. So it's been a learning curve for me as far as like what test I wanted from someone, because people are coming to me with this long laundry list of diagnoses. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't prescribe, so I don't care about those. I want to see what's happening on a mineral level. I want to see what's happening to your gut. I want to look at those things. So I initially just started looking at mineral levels and like an organic acid test to kind of see what was going on. Because since that was where I started anyway, I was like, okay, let's start with the gut. But then I would come across some more challenging patients who had, or even like hormones, see what's going on with those. Or the possibility of someone living in mold or, other things. And then I started requiring a little bit more because I don't want to be in the middle of a protocol and then be like, oh, actually, this might be mold, and then let's run this test. And so I just start. We had just have a full comprehensive look at what is in your body, what needs to come out, and what do we need to put back in it for it to, function properly. So I always run a toxin lab. So mycotoxins and environmental toxins. And we look at minerals and we look at gut. That's baseline. If we need to run like a GI map, if we need to look at hormones, whatever it may be, sometimes we add those on. But it's so much more important for me to see what is happening at this moment in your body than to see what thyroid condition you've been labeled with that is actually like because of your toxin load, right? So it's way more important to just look at everything across the board. So the patient and I have a really good picture of what their hitting points are. Like what is their body really holding on to and making them struggle so we know what to support.
Yeah. And the data doesn't lie, right? When you have it in front of them, it's hard to,
Well, that's the other thing
way.
too. That's exactly right. And so like for me personally, do I have to see their toxin load to know that they're toxic? I don't. But it's very important for them to see it so they can make those connections or think about the exposures that they might have right now, they've had in the past, whatever it may be. So we can make that full circle approach. So they, if somebody's saying, well, I don't really need to eat organic, and then their glyphosate is through the roof, well, maybe they do. And their mineral levels are like bottomed out. We're going to have to be organic, so it just helps make those connections.
It really does. That objective data, they can see it, and then you can use it to track and monitor and say, look how far we've come. I think that's really gratifying for people.
Agree.
And then what about, so we talked a little bit about testing. What are you really excited about right now in terms of treatment modalities, specific therapies? You mentioned a vortexer for the structured water. I think that sounds super cool. That could be something that you recommend to a patient. What other exciting things are you using right now?
Yeah. Honestly, I've recently been, I'm someone who love all the new cool things and things like that. But I've been inspired lately to return to nature more. That was my initial education was traditional naturopathy, where we learned about the sunshine and fasting and, all of these things. And so I've been inspired to reaffirm that into my clients and making sure they're using, all of these free medicines, essentially, like grounding, like, people they're like, okay, I'm just going to go barefoot and this is going to do nothing. But when you're like, no, it actually will help you with your nervous system. It will help you with your pH balance in your body, which is creating the situation for these pathogens to, continue to reside. It will help you with that chronic yeast infection. All of these things, you have to really talk people through how they're actually going to help them. But using more of these things like sunshine, grounding, even sound therapy for those really overactive nervous system type people, things like that it's I think we are in an age of information overload, and it's so hard to keep up, right? It goes in hand with that hustle culture. It's such a time to be alive, but also it's another overwhelmment, right? Where we feel like, oh, well, we were doing this for a week and then this person said this, so I'm going to try this now and we're going to shift. And so I think nature will always be there. Nature will always be consistent. And I think the more we learn to incorporate that into our healing, these supplements are going to come and go. The research is going to come and go. It's going to change. Our environment is constantly changing. So I think the more we can learn to simplify, that is kind of what where my heart is right now, because I think it will I think it will be refreshing to people to see how far they can get just building their foundation.
I love that. Yeah. I call it the Amazon culture. We've gotten so used to immediate gratification where we can order something and it's there the same day. We forget what it's like to actually, we've had decades of toxic burden and, other lifestyle changes. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. It truly is a process. So
it is a process. Yeah. And it's, and you can't, I one of my mentors that I kind of learned from is that anytime you're biohacking, even the term biohacking, you're kind of pushing the body, or you're skipping a process in the body, right? And you're going to pay for it on the back end. Not to say that there's some cool tools out there, but red light is never going to replace the sun. PEMF mats are never going to replace grounding. The Schumann resonance that you're getting from the frequencies of the earth, you can't replace that. So while those tools can be helpful, you are skipping natural processes when you're using them, and then you're essentially living on borrowed energy. Just like caffeine, right? So it's just it's just always keeping that in mind. Like, yes, these are cool, but they're also free. So
yeah, it's true.
It's a great point. And it begs the question, if someone's feeling well, maybe they come to you just to optimize and maintain. I'm curious, what is your opinion on regular detox support? Maybe annually? If someone's feeling good, you're not addressing a sign, symptom, condition, you're not assessing them for whatever.
Yeah, I do have that. I do have that happen. People are like, I just run my labs. I want to see where I'm at, and sometimes there will be a sign of like a toxicity lingering or some liver support needed or something like that. Sure. But what I usually run them through is, when we support any deficiency, is make sure that we're covering all our exposures and all of those things. I say at least doing some full moon parasite work seasonally is the bare minimum that people should be doing. But I think that you could be doing castor oil packs and dry brushing and all of this sauna, all of these fun things just to keep the body moving efficiently. So those people who feel good, we're making sure that we're still kind of building in some of those daily lifestyle habits to make sure they're draining properly.
It's a good reminder. It's daily habits. It's being really intentional with these things and making a habit of it, making sure that these things are sustainable, right? Because as you mentioned, Stacy, all these tips and tricks and tools, they're not sustainable. And what I say is, you can't take a pill forever. Sure, there's certain medications, thyroid replacement comes to mind, but in terms of supplements and a collection of supplements, you can't take all of that every day forever. You go through phases, right. But you can walk outside every single day. You can sweat a little bit every day if you're just moving your body, brisk walking. And it's really about building habits. And so it's a good reminder that we're continuously detoxing, and we can support that with these certain very easy to access natural things all the time.
Yes, and they are habitual in other countries. Like it's so just lost here, right? Like
Great point.
it seems too easy, but there, a lot of places you're walking everywhere you go and you're naturally getting more sunshine and you're eating in a parasympathetic state because they're not rushing you with the bill, right? You have to ask for it and you're with people you love and you're taking an hour for your morning coffee, it's completely different. So we have to focus on these things even more with the environment, the climate of today's society, right? And so it seems too easy, but it is truly just returning back to that like simplicity that a lot of other people are experiencing. We're just pretty far gone right now.
And I just want to make a note too. Like, I think it's so refreshing for someone like yourself who works with patients and clients, like to say that, some of these strategies that I'm giving you are free. I feel like so often that just builds trust in my mind because you're not asking them to pay for all these things. It's like, no, actually, a lot of the ways you can start to heal are free. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people do need to hear that. And, I would say early in my practice that I was more supplement heavy just because I was fresh out of like all these programs and learned all these cool protocols and things like that. But the people who actually adapt these daily habits are the ones who really take off. And so no matter how many supplements you're giving someone, it does not replace, these daily habits for sure. You can't replace it.
We call that nature cure, right? It's
yes.
a prescribed nature cure. And
yes.
that's a old school naturopathy prescription. And it's still extremely valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So cool. Well, speaking of, people and just being able to start to heal, I'd love to, I know we're kind of getting close to wrapping up, but do you have like a success story that sticks out, a patient you worked with that just saw really great results in implementing some of these things that we've talked about today?
Oh gosh, I would say I've been blessed already this year with a few infertility patients who we really they I mean, I can't I cry with them when they tell me they're pregnant. Like it's so beautiful. But really these women who are just like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. They're so desperate. They've been told they can't have babies, but I don't know why, because they're ovulating, like all these things are happening, but it really truly was their toxin load. They were, super high levels of BPA, glyphosate, paraben phthalates, things like that. All of those things are going to be hormone disruptive and more taxing on the HPA axis, which is going to affect your ovaries. And so, really, truly, I would say it can be such a quick shift if you're really pushing that reset button and just, going all in. And it wasn't a ton of supplements. It was really just correcting diet and exposures and just doing a little bit of lifestyle things. And, pregnancies within 2 or 3 months of just working on opening drainage and allowing the body to detox. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And then I had another one that sticks in my mind about, we located mycotoxins on her lab that were pretty high. And so she was kind of like homebound, young girl, homebound, really terrible neurological issues, super very sensitive to supplements, couldn't take anything, and would just really have, I would say almost like seizure-like activity. And then with us, finding on the mycotoxins that, this was in her environment, she ran an Emma test to match it up and was able to move out of where she was at. And literally as soon as she moved out, I've had a couple of these stories this year already, but as soon as they moved out of their environment, it was just like, finally their body could, get into somewhat of a parasympathetic state and actually tolerate the things that they needed to get that mold out of their body. And so yeah, it is really beautiful. And when you have that, and I think the maybe the theme of those stories in general is they just kind of said, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. I trust you. Just tell me what to do, because you do have a lot of people. Well, this person said this and I follow this one doctor and they say this. And for me, I'm like, I have your labs. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, this is what your labs are saying. This is what your body needs, So yes, while I appreciate your group, your Facebook group saying, oh, maybe it's this, or maybe you need this supplement. Like, this is why we run all these labs. They're expensive, So, so it can be a blessing and a curse, right, to have all this information right now. But those are some of the ones that I feel like are so, it's way easier to fix than what people will, lead you to believe. Like, these women really were in their early 30s believing they could never have a baby. And here they were pregnant within a couple months just because they were removing those environmental toxins. It's just so amazing to me how quickly you can turn things around.
What a gift you've given those women. I can only imagine. That's great.
Oh my gosh. I just want to cry every time I think about it.
So inspiring.
I'm just so blessed. And that's the thing. That's, for me, it's like when someone can enjoy their quality, like really just enjoy their life more, to me, that is healing. It's not so much about like, oh, well, let's remove this pathogen and let's remove this toxin. It's like, let's get you to a place where you actually love life. That is healing to me, And so if that means that you're finally pregnant and your body's healthy and can have that pregnancy, that's amazing. Or for a mom who's struggling and she's a stay-at-home mom and she finally is like, I actually enjoy being around my kids now. That is life-changing, right?
That's
I mean,
profound.
so those stories are so powerful.
Well, we could keep going on, but we are coming up on time, Stacy. And so it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. We've touched on quite a bit. Toxicity, hustle culture, and so much more in terms of getting back to nature and really that being the root of all of this. That's where we really have to start. So it's a good reminder. And before we send you off, we want to have a little bit of fun. We're going to do our 3 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes, let's go.
Here we go.
I'm scared.
No, don't be scared. Don't be scared. What is one of your guilty pleasures?
Oh gosh, guilty pleasure. I feel like I'm pretty lame. I used to watch reality TV, but I really don't anymore. I don't have any that
maybe
I know
because
of.
you don't feel guilt, which is a good thing.
Maybe that's it.
Part,
yeah.
Right?
It used to be reality TV, and really, going into this year, I was like, no, I don't. I mean, I would say maybe I sign up for way too many courses. I will say that is something that I'm like, I have a list. I'm like, oh,
learning.
It is. Isn't that so sad? I'm so lame. Yeah, that's my guilty pleasure.
Well, let it slide. I think that's great, though.
Is it? And I'm just wondering, Stacy, is it because maybe you're not getting around to actually diving into those courses, maybe on your timeline that you imagine? Because that's me, being really voracious in terms of learning and then saying, oh, I got excited and now I'm focusing over here instead. And I got distracted. Maybe that's ADHD that's gone undiagnosed. I don't know.
Sometimes that's it. And sometimes it's like, sometimes I sign up for one and I'm like, oh, I'm getting through that in like a weekend because I'm so excited about it. But I know there's a part of me that like I'm not like an impulse buyer anymore. So there's a part of me that like wants to go back and learn about methylation. It's just like, you have to be like, I've taken some deep dives into methylation. You have to be in a really specific frame of mind to like listen to biochemical things. So yes, you have to be in a very specific mindset, and sometimes it's hard for me to get there on the weekends.
Yeah, you got to be in the right mood. I have a webinar on methylation if you want to check it out. It's only an hour.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Yep. So
love
just
it.
throw that out there. But yes, you got to learn kind of what you're in the mood for in that moment in time.
Yes.
Okay, so 2 more. What is your spirit animal and why?
That's a good question. I would say a jaguar.
Ooh.
Because I just think that because when I just take off, I don't even care. Like, I don't even see anything else. I just like go, especially when my heart's passionate about something. I'm just like streamline, go.
Passionate jaguar.
Yeah.
Very cool. Like that. Okay. Night owl or early bird?
Definitely an early bird. I am pretty lame in the nighttime hours for sure. I'm trying to work with my circadian rhythm. I used to be like a 5 a.m.er, like workout, get it all done before the kids get up. But we're transitioning. They're going to be home with me. They're homeschooling starting in the fall. So I'm like, maybe I can actually get up with the sun now. So I'm kind of like, I kind of go back and forth, having that season of like waking up at 5 or actually sleeping a little bit later. But I would much rather, like, I am alert, awake in the morning, ready to take on the day for sure.
You prefer to be up before the sun. That's what you're saying.
Yes, I do. Usually. Yes. I like to get stuff checked off.
Well, again, we can't thank you enough for being here today, Stacy. I know I've learned a lot. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Tell them where they can find more of you. I know you have an amazing Instagram, your website. Where can they find you?
Yeah. So most people, I would say, find me on Instagram. It's dr.stacy.nd. I do have a podcast too. It's Vibing Well with Dr. Stacy. Yeah, we got that name thing that's going vibrant, vibing. Well, we're in the vibe for sure. Yeah. So I keep that updated as often as I can. I'm super stringent on that, but I'm definitely on Instagram the most. And that's the one social media I feel good about pouring into right now. I can't handle all the other ones. So that's where you can find me.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you guys. It's so great to meet you.
Thank you so much for being here today. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so we can continue to pay it forward together. And remember, the key to longevity is knowledge. Keep learning, growing, and tuning in to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast to discover the latest insights and strategies for optimal health. Join us again next week. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views expressed by guest and host are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy of Vibrant Wellness. As always, consult your healthcare provider before applying any recommendations that you heard here today.